Hi everyone. It seems to be that last night when we had when we met on Adobe Connect, it didn't get recorded correctly. So I'm just going to give an overview of what we did last night, and for those of you who did not attend, and also as a reminder to the main points that we went through. So what we did last night, we went through each of the team's projects. Database access files, and as I mentioned, that the main thing that I'm looking at when I look at any of your team's work, I look at the relationship. So I go to database tools, and then I go to the relationships, and I see and I look at these relationships. So these relationships should be connected in the correct way. So what I mean here is that we have done so far the conceptual model, the logical model, and now we are converting the logical model into a physical model. So in the conceptual model, we kind of try to identify all the data elements that we need for our project through interviews and observation, as well as through looking at the documents that are related to this project. And we were able to identify all of those data elements that we can see in this project, and we put those data elements, we just put them into mind map, and then from the mind map we kind of evolved into a logical model or entity relationship diagram or a class diagram. So we kind of combine those data elements into their own entities, and then when we connected, or we identify those entities with their attributes or their fields and their characteristics, we wanted to connect them. So those entities need to be connected with each other, and how to connect those entities with each other is through foreign keys. And if you notice now that all of those tables that are, so now I can say this one here in Access is the physical model, because we already converted it from the entity relationship diagram that you created using Visio as a model. Now we converted that into an actual or a physical model that is really built in to the system. So now when I look at this, I can see that we have, for example, those two tables here, resident demographics and problem list. They are connected through MRN. So MRN is used in the problem list here as a foreign key as well as a primary key, because this is an associated or associative entity or table. It has to have the primary key from those two tables surrounding it, because we have a many-to-many relationship between ICD codes and resident table. So we create a third table. We call it an associative entity that consists of the primary keys from both of its surrounding tables. And one of you asked last night, why do we need those two to be a primary key? We need those two because we need every record to be unique. So a combination of those two will make every record in this table to be unique, and also we need those keys here in order to help us later on when we are running queries. So basically those keys here are helping us to connect all of those database tables here. We can run a query from any table using those primary keys and foreign keys. Anyways, this one now, I can see I would highly recommend that you read the grading criteria for this unit. And as you might have noticed, that we have a data dictionary, and the data dictionary, you have templates in Excel that you will need to fill out. then that dictionary will help as a documentation proof for those people who will come and take over after you leave that organization or maybe get promoted or so on. But we need that documentation. We call it data dictionary. Other people might call it also metadata, which is data about data. And for that is a very important documentation. And remember also, when you read the directions and the reading, you will notice that we discussed the naming convention. So the naming conventions for tables should follow the Microsoft naming convention. For example, for every table, it should start with TBL, which is an abbreviation, and then what you have been using here is a camel case naming convention, which is great. So I like what you have so far in this, especially for the blue team. But the only thing that I would suggest is that make sure that every table starts with TBL, because this will be beneficent or will be helpful for us when we are running queries and creating reports and creating forms, because we need to distinguish between which one is a table, which one is a report, which one is a query, and which one is another object. So TBL will help us identify this one is as a table. For this team here, they did a great job. I can see that everything looks perfect to me. And what I also looked at, I also mentioned that the two main things that I'm looking at is the patient demographics, and patient demographics, or the patient entity, and the assessment entity. Those are the two kind of main tables that I'm interested in. And if I look at the resident demographics table here, it has a lot of other related tables to it, that when you create a form, you will definitely need to combine all of that together. So the resident with its surrounding, that or the tables that are very related to it. And then the Morse-Fall assessment, that's also one of our main tables or main objectives for this project is assessment. So let's look at maybe at the Morse-Fall assessment table for this group, and I will see what how their table looks like. And as I mentioned that also yesterday, that every foreign key should be used as a looked up from its main table. For example, MRN is the primary key for resident demographics, but it is used as a foreign key in the Morse-Fall assessment. So this foreign key should definitely, or has to be, looked up and designed as a lookup. So let me see if this group made it as a lookup. It doesn't, because if it is a lookup, there should be a drop down button. So it is not. Let me create it for them and for you, just as a demo how to create a lookup. So I will delete this relationship before I create a lookup for this table. So I will create a lookup for this MRN to be looked up from its main original table, which is the resident demographics. So let's do that. I'll go to design view for this table MRN, and then here instead of number, I will just I will click that, and I will select the lookup wizard, and then I'll just follow the wizard. So where do I want it to be looked up from? I want the table that is called demographics, resident demographics. Here it is. And then I will go on and I will select MRN. I also want maybe the first name and last name, so for now. Alright, let's see now. I will order by last name. it seems to be that we don't have this team doesn't have records yet for any in the demographics table, so that's why we don't see any records, but at least this is what we have. And I will give a demo on my own table or on my own database access file later on. So this is how we create it. So we need a uniquely identifier here, so MRN is a unique identifier. Finish, and then save, yes, and then close this guy, and then also close this guy, and let me go back. Now you will notice that there is a connection between MRN and MRN in between those two tables, but we don't have the cardinalities. We don't see the multiplicities or cardinalities, which means the one-to-many or one-to-one or and so on. So for that we need to enforce. So I will just try to click on this line connecting those two tables, edit relationship, and it is one-to-many. So I will enforce referential integrity and cascade update related fields. So we discussed also the importance of referential integrity and cascade updates. Referential integrity here will not allow us to have, for example, will allow us to make sure that every data type that we enter for MRN in one of those two tables has to be the same, and the values have to be the same, and will not allow us to enter any MRN that is not already existing in the resident demographics table. And cascade updates related fields, this will help us if we add, for example, an MRN in the demographics table. This will help us actually be able to see it in the demographics or in the Morse-Fall assessment. So just to give you a demo, let me just create an imaginary patient in the demographics. So I will keep saving everything every now and then. So let me create an imaginary patient. So let's see here, say male, first name, date of birth. So we'll say this person was born today, okay, and I will save this guy and close. So now if I go to the Morse-Fall assessment table, this is what I will be talking about. When I click on the MRN, I will see that the MRN ID that I just created in the demographics table, that's what we mean here by cascade updates. So the updates, whatever I update in the demographics table will be updated, and I will be able to see it in the lookup field from the Morse-Fall assessment. And this is what I mean by lookup. So every foreign key has to be looked up, and this team did a great job also by creating lookups for the questions tables. So history of falling, yes or no. So this is great. So they have done so this is what I'm expecting from each of the teams to do. Nurse, we don't have items for nurse yet, but time of assessment, if you want, you can do that. The date, you can either do this or use it seems to be this team used the masked input, and so on. Comments, perfect. This looks good. The only thing that they will need to fix is the MRN needs to be looked up here. So that was the blue team. Let me look at the next team, the green team. Let's see what the green team have so far. So the green team so far had connected relationships, all the questions tables in the assessment or in our scale or in our measurement. They might need to do some renaming, but it seems to be their tables names are using the naming convention, which is great. and it seems to be that they have one-to-many relationship from all of those questions tables, and the Morseful assessment table. That looks great. But I don't see that the Morseful assessment is connected to the resident demographics. Definitely it has to be connected, and I don't see an MRN here that should be used to connect. So we will need an MRN key or field in this Morseful assessment table. And why do we decide to put the MRN in the Morseful assessment rather than putting the Morseful assessment ID in the resident demographics? So that's a good question that we should ask. So the answer to that question is that when we look at the relationships between those two entities, we need to look at the cardinalities or multiplicities. What is the relationship between those two tables? So resident and assessment. So is it one-to-one, one-to-many, or many-to-many? So when we look at this, so we will say that every resident will have many assessments, because they will have one assessment, for example, when they are first admitted. They will have another assessment every 2 weeks, and they will have an assessment if they are changed off unit, or if they are discharged. So there are several occasions where for every patient or every resident will have several assessments. So now this is why we say it is one-to-many, because of this logical way. And every assessment will belong to one and only one resident. So this is why we say it is one-to-many. And when we have one, so the relationship will be one from the demographics to many. This is how we read it. So the many side should be the Morseful assessment. And when we decide where to put the foreign key in which table, we always, this is a rule of thumb, if we have a one-to-many relationship, we always put the foreign key in the many side. So what is the many side? It is this side. The Morseful assessment is the many side. That means we will have to have MRN as a foreign key in this table, because as we said, the primary key, if it is used in a foreign table that it is not its original table, then it will become a foreign key. In this case, its original table for MRN is the resident. That is its original table. So when we put it in another table, then it becomes a foreign key. So we should put MRN in the Morseful assessment here as a foreign key. That way we can link them together, and we will be able to link those two tables, so that way we can link them for the form's sake and for the query's sake and report sake as well. Other things is that the relationships here are not, they should not be like that. They should be either one-to-many or and so on. So there should be when those relationships should be enforced in referential integrity and cascade updates. It might not work because some of the data types have to be matched. So phone ID and phone ID data type should be matched. Exactly how you put it in one table, it should be in the other table, and so on. So we went through that yesterday, and I will let you fix that. So that's and also I can see here, for example, we have associative entities between resident demographics and, let's say, phone types. There is a many-to-many relationships between those two tables here, and that's why we created this associative entity, which is called the table phones. So for that, you will need to have MRN as well as phone ID as combined or composite primary key. So you have to do that in order for those two to make every record unique. So to do that as well, I showed yesterday, and let me go over it right now, how to do it. So we will need to select control and select both both fields, and then go to design and primary key. Now you will see that I have the primary key in both fields. So that's how you make them both. The same thing should be for this one. And as I also mentioned, that they need this team needs to add also the state abbreviation. Just to name a few, and let's move on to the next team. So we went through the blue, green, and then the red team. So the red team so this is what they have. I also don't see that they have built that relationships. Again, they need to combine those two as composite key, problem list, ID, problem list. So it should be ICD9 code ID and MRN. So so those two should be your primary key. So you will figure that out, and you can compare yours to mine. As I mentioned, I will send you mine, and that might make life much easier. And another thing is that the demographics table is not connected to Morseful assessment table, so it has to be connected, and to do that we will just happen. My computer is frozen. Alright, so this is what I will do. So I have one to many, I will enforce integrity, and this is what I will do. So now they are connected, resident demographics and the Morseful assessment. As I mentioned earlier, that those foreign keys need to be looked up. Even those ones here, for example, history of falling, needs to be looked up or programmed as a lookup field. That way you can look it up from here, from from its original table. And similarly to all other tables that are connected to Morseful assessment. To conclude, let me show you my file, or the relationships for my own that I am using for this class. You can see this is how I organized it, and you can see that every relationship is identified between each of those tables, and I have combined those two guys here as composite key. Same thing here, this guy came from here and MRN came from here, even though the naming is a little bit different, but the content should be the same, and also the data type should be the same. That was all that I wanted to show you, but let me just show you one more thing here, like how it looks like here when you have all your tables populated. Yep, so I hope that this helps, and I'm going to send you this I will send you this video in a little bit along with a screenshot, or along with this one screenshot of my relationships. Alright, good luck to you all, and I will talk to you later for when we are working on the forms assignment. Alright, good luck, bye.